Okay, everyone, so we're starting the recording. I want to welcome you officially to the first meeting of the MarTech Book Club. My name is Michael Tucker, and we're lucky to have four of us here that'll be moderating this session today. Our first our first book is going to be on Bill McDermott's book, Winner's Dream, A Journey from Corner Store to Corner Office. And so I have an interesting, lively discussion that's all planned for us here. We hope this is going to be the first of many different books that we'll be able to review and talk about, and really just kind of bring back the art that is the business book, and be able to talk about that a little bit more, and some of the learnings both that we gained from this book, and then the principles beyond that too. So if you haven't read the book, not a problem. Still great opportunity to be able to distill some of the principles that Bill talks about from this and be able to apply it to your respective careers. So let's kick off with this. MarTech Book Club originally wasn't my idea. It's actually Jessica Cow's. And so, Jessica, can we start off with maybe you have doing an introduction to yourself, and we can go around the room a little bit and just quickly introduce kind of who you are, what you do, company-wise, Marketo community-wise, and then pass it around.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Cow. I am the Marketo user group leader here in Silicon Valley. For my day job, I work for Digital Pie as a marketing automation, specifically Marketo consultant. Three-time Marketo champion of the year, Fearless 50. And really, the impetus behind starting this book club was, I wanted to read more books, and what better way to read more books than get peer pressure and start your own book club, right? Professional development, because I know we get really busy, and as all of us are leaders of Marketo user groups around the country and around the world, there are over 100 of us. Part of what we love about the Marketing Nation is to really inspire B2B marketers, because it's been such an integral part in my career, and as I'm sure in all of our careers, and constantly trying to find new ways to inspire our community. So I thought, what better way than to kick it off with a book club, and another, just a different way to help all of us in the community out there be better.
Love it. Hey, Brooke, why don't you go next?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Brooke Bartos. I co-lead the Chicago area MUG. I'm a two-time Marketo champion, member of the Fearless 50 class for this year, and really excited to take part in this book club. I've always had a love for reading. I'm actually involved in a local book club here as well, but I like being able to have the opportunity to broaden my reading horizon and get involved in an opportunity to read the types of books that can help me advance my career and take an introspective look at my own skill sets and the things that I bring to my job every day, and then be able to really help share that within my local users group. I think that's the reason we've all become users group leaders, is to try to help the people around us as well as we grow and develop our own knowledge. So I'm really looking forward to working with all of you and sharing ideas, insights from the books that we read going along.
Great. Christina, you're moderating the session, and you're also working in the chat room as well. So could you do kind of an introduction and then just tell us a little bit about the rules of the road in the chat room?
Sure. Well, I'll introduce myself first.
Sure.
My name is Christina Zuniga. I am the co-leader of the Santa Barbara Marketo user group. I'm Fearless 50 and a champion. I saw about this book club because of Michael, and I gotta say, I read a lot of books, but I have no one to talk to. And so my poor fiance has to listen to me all the time, and he just nods and smiles. So I'm really looking forward to talking to people and have someone know what I'm talking about. He's excited about this too. In terms of the chat and moderating, if you're comfortable speaking up, please do. We really encourage it. Even if you haven't read the book, if you hear something that somebody's talking about and you want to give your own experience, we highly encourage it. We want this to be really interactive. If you are a shy person, we totally understand. Feel free to send your chat with your comments, and we'll work that in. So I'll be monitoring this. I'm not looking distantly forward. I'm reading your comments.
That's great. And then I guess we'll do the last introduction. So I'm Michael Tucker. I'm a marketing technology consultant with a conversion store. I'm a Marketo user group leader as well. I run the manufacturing virtual Marketo user group. So I'm on these online sessions quite a bit. Next one is January 24th, shameless self-plug on 10 ways to improve your database quality with Elliot Lowe at Ringlead. And definitely I think there's an opportunity for all of us to do that. And before we kind of dive into the discussion, I think the next thing we want to do is talk a little bit about the plot line and what this book is about. Let's do a quick check-in with some of the different people that are in the audience here. Since we're talking about user group leaders, I'd like to welcome our newest one, Jackie Potts, who is running the North American virtual Marketo user group. Jackie, you have an event coming up pretty soon here, don't you?
We do. Next Tuesday, we have our first actual meeting coming up, and Sydney Mulligan's going to be presenting, and then we have some panelists to help us, including yourself. So we're excited to get it started and bring together people virtually, and plan to plug all of the upcoming regional mugs, but also start bringing together people like myself who can't make it to a regional mug.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks very much. Welcome aboard, and we're glad to have you. Let's dive into the slides a little bit here. And the first thing we want to do really is talk a little bit about the plot line and what the story is all about. So maybe Jess, could you start off with that? What's this book all about?
What I found really fascinating about this book, right, as well as, a lot of business and leadership books, like this almost to me read like a novel. It was really about Bill and his journey from when he was, his business journey really started at such a young age, and him telling his stories, about, his paper route, when he was really little to, running the deli with his family, to his journey, his first job outside of school at Xerox, to literally following his whole career. And what I really liked about it was, as a lot of business books are very, I wouldn't say academic, but they're in lecturing, where we're like, it's a principle, that you learn these principles. But with this book, what I really loved about it was that you gleaned the principle from the story, and it almost read like a novel, and you wanted to know like what happened next. And I couldn't put the book down at all until I finished it. So I really love that, because it wasn't, and I think, in our discussion previously, we talked about it was very subtle. The messages in there and the themes in there are really subtle. And it was almost like you had to work in a very good way to really glean the insights for yourself and what would be relevant for your own career. And what I really found is like that different people glean different things, like different readers are going to glean different things from this book, which is why I really, really enjoyed the book.
Yeah. Now, I thought that what's neat, and I want to give some context, of course, for people who haven't read the book that are on the call yet too. So this book goes through chronologically, right? It's really organized from, I think the very first paragraph is about a house fire that happened when he was like 8 years old or something like that. And then really kind of moves through high school years, college years, building this business. So maybe we can walk through that in the same chronology just to give a little bit of context, and that way everybody's kind of on the same page as to what this book is about. So the very first part of that, Bill is from New York, from Long Island and Queens. And I think what I saw, if anybody was on the landing page and saw the brief video that Bill recorded about this, SAP is one of the largest technology companies in the world, but Bill came from really humble beginnings. And I think that's really important to kind of say about this book, that, his success was not a given or a certainty. It was something that he just manifested for himself through sheer will and hard work and dedication. So what were those early years like? What did you get that kind of stuck out from you the most about those early years, Brooke?
I think the biggest thing is I really I saw a lot of how he developed later in the book coming from his origins with his mom. I think the focus on his mom a lot at the beginning set the stage for that. You mentioned the house fire, but he also had a younger brother who, when he was born, they were told would not live very long. His brother ended up living to be 5 years old before he passed away. And you kind of see the way the family processed that as they were grateful for having had that time, and they appreciated that. And it wasn't so much a dwelling on sadness and loss as being grateful and appreciative for what they did have. And that carried through to the scenario with the fire too, when his mom stood there with her arms around them and said, what is standing out here on the sidewalk is more important than what is in there. We will rise above this. And that kind of continued to sort of lay this foundational message that I think carried through, every role that he went through, and every thing that he started to run into that was a challenge for him was, I will find a way around this and I will rise above this. And this determination and optimism. So the first part of the book really, laid that out for me is where that came from and where those kinds of values were instilled in him from.
That's a really good point. I noticed a lot of that actually, like you said, it's throughout the book where you have different challenges. So, probably the next part, and the part that, to give everybody a little bit of context, we'll talk about this afterwards about Bill speaking at Marketo Summit, but it's on the corner, it's on the cover of the book. Bill in high school had 3 different part-time jobs and eventually worked his way into running and ultimately owning this corner store in Amityville, Long Island. And that process alone by itself, there were some real challenges that he had coming into that. I remember something about a robbery happening in the store and having it cleaned out, and some other challenges there. Who's familiar with that at the best? Who can speak to that? To how Bill got the store. Christina, maybe?
Sure. Well, without giving too much of the book away, because if you haven't read it, you should. I think what resonated the most with me about Bill is that he has this self-confidence, and I think Brooke set it up. He really gets that at the beginning from his parents, and especially his mother, and he gives her a lot of credit for things like that. But he really, at his heart, seems to be a salesman. He starts with these 3 jobs, realizes he can make money at a deli without having to work 3 jobs and make much more, sells himself to that, and then he doesn't ever explicitly say this is his philosophy, but it's almost like he says he's going to do something, he does it, and then he tells people what he did, which a lot of people have been told to do, but he just sort of lives it. So he said, I'm going to run this deli. He did it, and then he told people about it. And he put his trust, along with the owner, in somebody who took advantage of them and stole everything, leading to what could have been a horrible situation in the destruction of this small business. But instead of seeing it as a negative thing, like the house fire, he saw it as an opportunity and became a small business owner while going to high school, and took that over. And he had to use those selling skills to figure out a way to restock the store, even whenever everything had been completely cleared out and he had no money and no way of getting credit because he was a kid.
That's a really great point. That whole part about segmentation, I remember that in his speech when we were all in San Francisco and watching that at Marketo Summit again, is that, he was just saying, listen, I broke my customers down into 3 different groups. We had construction workers who had a lot of money on Friday, but didn't have a lot of money on Mondays. So he would extend them credit. And the neighborhood kids who wanted a place to be able to hang out that they were comfortable with and get good food at a good price. And more importantly, be treated respectfully so that they were able to kind of enjoy the spot and weren't. I think they're saying that the corner store down the street, they sort of treated these people like shoplifters, and that he was more respectful with these teenagers, and that's why a lot of them came to that store. And I find that so interesting too, because, in this day and age, we are all data-driven marketers, and we have these wonderful tools at our disposal to be able to identify some of these segments and be able to kind of treat people differently. Bill didn't have that at all, and yet he was still able to kind of incorporate those principles in a much smaller business than we normally work in, to be able to kind of build the same sort of result. So that's a pretty interesting skill set, and maybe a little bit of a pioneer in a way, if you think about it from that perspective. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. Did you want to go, Jessica?
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, really what he did was identify his 3 top personas and then find their pain points and make his business work for those particular pain points to make those people valued and repeat customers. But it must have been at the time the 70s. So you look at today with companies that are learning about personas. And so I like the way you put it, definitely a pioneer in the space if he figured that out, even if he didn't have that particular name for it.
Yeah.
I think to me, like the couple of themes that really resonated throughout all of his, situations or, as he was growing up and as he was, getting his jobs is the importance of trust or building trust and building a relationship with your customers, right? Whether it's at the corner store or at a big Fortune, 500 company, it's that relationship and the integrity, right? Like he got those vendors to give him credit because he built this, he spent the time and was like, and always functioned with integrity. And that's something that really I was really pleasantly surprised, that, like the integrity, trust, relationship is the utmost importance.
Absolutely.
I was going to say the same thing, and I think that it goes both ways. It was the business relationship with the vendors, but also the trust and the relationship established with the three different personas. I mean, by offering credit to construction workers, he mentioned that sometimes they would go 1, 2, 3 weeks without paying, but they always paid up because he trusted them and they returned that. Or the teenagers, I think my favorite line when it came to the teenagers was, hey, we come here when we want to be respected, but we go to the 7-Eleven when we want to steal stuff. And that was the way the 7-Eleven treated them, was that they were going to steal stuff. So they only let 4 kids in at a time, and these kids had to wait outside. And so the way they were treated, they reflected that back in their relationship with the 7-Eleven and their relationship with Bill's Deli. So I found that really interesting and intriguing as well. And yeah, as you mentioned, he breaks it down into segmentations and really dove into what are their needs and what can I do to address that. He's listened and took to heart the pain points that his customers had and then was able to sell that and to build upon that.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you think about it. You think about all the loyalty programs that we have these days, and the different ways that we have to provide creative treatments, to offer different sorts of incentives or different types of, let's say, payment terms, for example, to different groups of clients. I mean, that's really interesting to think about that. He had, I think his original database, if you will, was that little book, that ledger book that he had, right? He didn't even have, an electronic POS or like a Square tablet or something like that we would use nowadays. So how great is that you're What's that?
I said that was his CRM.
That's right.
Right. A little book in his back pocket on his paper route.
That's great. Let's go to Xerox. Let's talk a little bit about Bill at Xerox. This guy sold a lot of photocopiers. Well,
I was like something that definitely inspired me was just like, again, the other theme was his relentless pursuit of goals, pie in the sky goals that the first reaction I would have that goal is like, there's no way. It's like utter skepticism. And, the fact that at his age, he knew at his first job that he was very bold and wanted to be the CEO. Most people would just write off some young kid who's like, yeah, right. You want to be CEO. But it definitely made me take pause of his grit and determination. And, that's why I love our little phrase, what would Bill do when we're all of us are faced with challenges now. And I think honestly, like after reading the book, it's like, okay, instead of like writing things off, I'm like, take a pause and be like, okay, what would Bill do? Right. All right, let's just try it. And you know what? I've pleasantly surprised myself and all of us. So
No, I felt like going at this was such an interesting thing, and I thought it was interesting to see. He moved a tremendous volume, but he was very innovative about the way that he went about it. And not to detract from this story, but it reminded me of if anybody's ever seen The Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith, where he's at Merrill Lynch, and he's got the list of different prospects to call, and instead of starting at the top, he started at the bottom and worked his way up, and or at the middle of the list. And it reminded me of Bill being in the lobby of a lot of those skyscrapers in Midtown Manhattan and kind of saying, yeah, I could do door to door and knock on one customer, or I could make friends with the concierge, stand in the lobby of these buildings, and then, really, get cards from dozens upon dozens of people as they're walking into these buildings. I thought that was really interesting.
I like this episode about, do you remember the cat who was the boss in the room?
Garfield.
I loved it because I think this is what happens all the time when you really just need to figure out. And I believe he has like super high emotional intelligence, either naturally or he just developed it over time. But when he was like saying that those scratches upon me, but I was still understanding that the way I'm. And remember, there was another dog that was playing with him, and that was another like additional pivot points where
at SAP. Yeah, I like that a lot too. I'm that person, by the way. I don't know if you've seen it, and behind me, you probably see my dog's tail sticking out around the corner as he's going for water. But I'm that person as well too. So I thought that was really, that's really interesting to kind of see how he's doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I think
it reminded us a lot of the concept of, this is something my mom always told me is, treat the secretary the same way you treat the CEO. Mm. And you see that as he, the relationships with the doorman or the conversations that he'd have with business owners and a new business moving down the hall of like, hey, do you guys know the guys from the advertising agency? Could you make an introduction? And he kind of shared that respect equally. It wasn't that he, would look at the company president or, this person with the buying authority and treat them differently. He treated everyone with a respect that made them feel valued and important. And I think through that, he built a ton of allies to really help support him and support his cause as he went forward, allies outside of his organization even.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The thing that I took away from that section, that story, his journey, and from all of it, is his journey at Xerox, going and taking over, the Puerto Rico territory, who was ranked last, 64th out of 64th of all the territories, and how he said that he was going to make it first, out of all the territories. That in all of the goals and all of his, accomplishments, it always included about people. It wasn't just about, hey, we're going to do X, but it was equally important to motivate and understand people. I mean, that's the theme, right? Understand people as your customers, understand people as your vendors, understand the people that you're working with, because that's how you're really going to get to whatever goal. And it's about, I remember something in the book where he talked about how you get all these people to work together, right? To reach that goal. It's not just about saying, here's this, what seems like, this really high bar goal, but I felt like he also put the effort in there to figure out, okay, how am I going to get the people bought in and marching together, collaborating and working together? And I think a lot of times when we're, busy, I'm busy in my day-to-day job, we forget that we're just trying to get things done, and we forget to take the people along with us in the journey.
Yeah. I felt like that was interesting to kind of see how you're sort of able to break people out of their comfort zone a little bit too, to be able to kind of break down those barriers a lot of ways. And it reminds me of those initial conversations, just to foreshadow a little bit onto the SAP management team, trying to get them into coffee chat corners where they're not used to talking about something that they haven't prepared for already. And being able to say, hey, we're going to go to our teams and let's empower all of our different people in our sales teams to be able to say, here's the direction we're going. You have me to rely on as your manager. You also have other people in the organization to rely on as well too. So you're not in it alone, but we do want you to kind of push the envelope a little bit to be able to hit some of these big, hairy, audacious goals.
And those goals, I really sorry, did I cut up someone?
Oh,
I really like when he was saying, I would rather reach out to the sun and won't reach it, but I will like touch the moon, versus I will be putting moon as my ultimate goal, or something along those lines, when he was saying like, we really want to have the goal that inspires, that motivates, that everyone is saying, wow.
Yeah.
And then this is how he was like putting people around himself. That's, I believe, interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I actually brought my book over here with me, open to a specific page, and it's that we mentioned this because this is the page that I have open. It's on page 193 in the chapter Epiphany, and he actually sat and listed out his career aspirations. Number one, to be a winner, but number two on his list was to lead others to the doorsteps of their dreams. And so that's, you know, you mentioned Puerto Rico and even moving into other roles at Xerox Chicago and moving into SAP, it's rallying everybody and get them behind, but giving them one goal, one dream that they can achieve together. You know, to use his phrase, the passion and the fire that brings to it. I mean, it's incredible the way he's able to get that kind of buy-in across every level of an organization and get people so inspired.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think to tie it back, you know, to tie it back to this group, right? Because all of us, I believe, actually all of us are Marketo user group leaders. And, you know, part of why, I mean, completely right, it's all voluntary. It's like, you know, I'm sure we're all up at midnight, you know, writing and booking space and trying to run our user groups in addition to our part-time jobs. And part of that is, you know, the inspiration that I've received from the Marketing Nation and from all of you and previous Marketo user group leaders has really elevated me into where I am in my career. Part of why I do it, and I don't know if that's why all you do it, is to do that, is to lead all of these people, all of these other members in all of our respective cities and virtually. We make a difference in other people's professional and personal lives as well. And I think that's, and that really resonated with me. And I think, you know, resonates a lot, especially with this group.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like the whole is greater than the sum of the parts when you think of Marketing Nation and the Marketo community as a whole. It has certainly been that way for me, and it's a unique, challenging skill to pick up to be able to be a successful marketing automation leader, because you need to have the people skills and the technology skills and an understanding of the sales environment and how to be able to do to understand what good design is and understand the entire life cycle process and kind of what that's involved with, right? But to know that you have a group of people around you to be able to rally with you and support you, and if you have an area where you're struggling to kind of understand that there's this person, that person, or another person who's been able to do that. One of the things, my last, and just to segue a little bit here, last year was my first Marketo Summit conference. And what surprised me the most about it was that it wasn't just a technology conference, it's also a career development conference. There's a lot of sessions that are in there about personal growth and development. And I want to share one quick screenshot that came up that you shared, Jess, about, you know, all of us learning about Bill was originally his session here at Marketo Summit, speaking with Steve Lucas, and talking a little bit about his stories. So was everybody here at Marketo Summit? Who else was there? And you know, tell me a little bit about what your first impressions were as Bill was coming on stage here and sharing the story.
I mean, for me, I thought his enthusiasm the minute he walked out the door was just infectious. I mean, you could see that this was a person that carried himself with so much energy and fire, you know, and when he sat down with Steve and started their conversation, I mean, it poured out from him, every bit of it. It was fascinating to watch, really.
Mm.
I mean, honestly, after reading the book, I was like, okay, can I go work for SAP now?
You know what really surprised me by it is I was when I saw him on the agenda and I was coming to I think it was the first session of the day, if I remember correctly, on like the second day or something like that. and not knowing exactly what to expect. I'm thinking, okay, there's going to be some sort of a product announcement by SAP. It's going to be a very tech-heavy conversation. We'll be able to see a lot of graphs and charts, and you know, then they sit down and they're having such a real conversation about, you know, technology aside and what we're trying to do aside. Let's talk a little bit more about what is what this story is about, and about life, you know, because at the end of the day, the technology is empowering organizations, but those organizations in turn are also, you know, they're creating jobs, and they're putting food on the table for all these different people. And what I got from the book too, you know, a couple of things that came out of that was that welfare to work program that President Clinton had asked him to be involved in, and the some of the people on Team F, where he was kind of outlining what is your goal, what do you want to be able to get. Like, you're pounding the pavement, you're making all of these calls, you're working all of these sales conversations, but at the end of the day, there's got to be a purpose to it. And what is that? And what does that mean to you? And let's take that down to the personal level, and that, you know, drives the motivation for you to be able to do what you're doing to hit these, you know, incredible revenue numbers, and get a Christmas party, for example, things like that.
I think what was interesting was that when he, you know, came in, I forget if it was Gartner or SAP, and, you know, when he inherited a team and needed to bring his own people, or if it wasn't the right fit, he always showed respect to people, whether he was interested in what that person wanted, and it might be with his team, it might not be with his team, but at the end of the day, you know, he treated everyone with integrity and wanted to know what was best for that person, which was, you know, again, really impressive. I guess it's I wouldn't say sad that that's not the norm today. If you, I don't know, for where I, you know, the environment that I'm in, that's not what we expect, or that's not the norm that I see around, you know, the workplace, or as a common thing, is that, you know, everyone is treating everyone with integrity and respect. And I do like the fact that, you know, he's not interested in rumors. He's not interested in he said, she said. He's interested in getting things done, working collaboratively as a team. And all of that doesn't stem from his, you know, I mean, it wasn't mentioned in the book, stemming from his, you know, MBA or business schooling. A lot of that comes from his dad's coaching of the basketball team. I don't know if anyone wants to kind of comment on that.
Yeah. I agree with you, Jess. Like, in terms of your that's part of the reason why I work for myself now is I found the experience to be a lot more. I try and take care of my clients the very best that I can, and they've been very good to me, and that sort of relationship, bringing those sort of principles, that's the sort of thing that you get the freedom to be able to do by working for yourself, and that's the biggest reason I do it, more above and beyond everything. Even though you know, being able to kind of be at home and spend more time with my ailing dog, you know, that's that aside. You know, it's also, you get to embed and you get to use and own the values and the principles that you've picked up through all these different interactions. And you know, my brief experience with management has been, you know, I always try and take care of my guys, and a lot of my guys you'll see on my LinkedIn or my references are people that I'm still in touch with today, because you know, there were times when the company didn't require me to give them a commission check, but I'd pay them out of my own pocket, and because it's the right thing to do. And even though, whatever, you know, you see, he had a lot of rules and regulations in this book that he walked through and said, hey, the gym costs too much. Let's reduce the cost of the gym so that people can use it. You know, there's we normally don't do meetings this way. Let's just do meetings this way. We want to have the biggest conference ever for XPS, to be able to kind of announce that the Xerox is in the services business. Let's just do it. And you know, if we treat people really well, then they'll deliver for us to be able to bring these numbers home. And what's great is that this book is a testament to all those things actually happened because he believed and invested in the people around him.
Okay, I too brought my book, but I don't think it's going to be the same page as yours because mine's a Kindle. But at one point he talks about, he went to that Xerox management and they taught him processes, like how to do a formal review and things like that. But he says explicitly on one page, processes are not leadership. And to me, especially since all of us are in an operations type role, and so process is very important to most of us here, that really resonated with me because often people get really stuck in the details, and yes, that day-to-day Jessica was talking about, but it's not leadership. And we have such an opportunity in operations to be leaders because we have all the data at our fingertips and the ability to interpret it and influence all these different departments. So that part was, I think, huge.
So I think the culmination on all of this is the SAP years, right? All these experiences that Bill had really transitioned to SAP. Maybe we can move the conversation a little bit to talking a little bit about, I guess that point in between is probably good to mention. I can't remember who mentioned, I think it was you, Brooke, that mentioned about the Gartner years briefly and about that transition out of Xerox.
I think that was that, yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about that time.
Well, yeah, I think it was Jeff that mentioned that. But he mentioned, I think it was 93-ish, that he first made a move over to Gartner that lasted about 2 weeks. And realized after having done so that it just wasn't the right fit. He wasn't ready. He missed Xerox, but he had more to accomplish there, and went back. And fast forward several years later is when he, turned down another job offer because dollars were there, but gut check, it just didn't feel like the right role for him. And so then he ended up again at Gartner. And I think going into that role, then he had much more commitment. He was ready for a change. They had some family things going on at that time. His wife had breast cancer that she had just made a recovery from, and he and his family were ready for a fresh start. And so he was ready for a different perspective. And I think he was able to take so much of his experience from Xerox and from XDS and that sort of legacy, process-oriented, detail-oriented organization, and he moved over to Gartner. And I actually thought it was kind of two positions, the complete difference in corporate culture of people showing up in shorts and Hawaiian shirts and trying to change the style and just realizing that it wasn't a good fit for him. And going back to his suits and how he felt comfortable. And I think that was sort of reflective in not changing, being true to yourself and personal integrity. It's just a little window into that, but in something so small like wardrobe. But it shows the types of things that he brought into his role at Gartner, this organization at the time that was, kind of starting to take off in digital and IT and data technology and processing. Certainly not the Gartner that we know, today, 20 years later. Wow, that's a long time. That has best. And but it shows how he was able to kind of bridge that gap and try to bring those worlds together, and what he was able to bring into that with his fire and passion and goals to elevate that organization while still staying true to himself.
Yeah, I felt like this is the one, actually, to use a Gartner thing, is that they have this technology adoption curve, and I always remember the wording of it. It's how technology is traditionally adopted, and there's one of the elements of it is called the trough of disillusionment, and it's right after a product's being introduced, there's a period of time where the interest wanes and then suddenly climbs back. And if you look at technologies over time, it does that. That sort of felt like it's kind of this trough of disillusionment part where he was trying to kind of find his way post Xerox and what's the right fit for me? Where do I belong? What's my contribution and my best value to an organization, and also to kind of match that with what my expectations are for myself and my family and my lifestyle. So anybody have any experiences that they can kind of relate to that in their own careers, perhaps, or maybe what that period of time sort of meant to you as you were reading that?
Yeah, I was gonna say, because the comment that stuck out to me, because he didn't stay at Gartner very long. It was really quick. But his comment, I think after going to SAP, was that all of his experience prior set him up for SAP. So it's not like, okay, Gartner might not have been the best fit for him, but again, it's not like it shouldn't be a regret, because that is what that foray into technology is what set him up to be the ideal candidate to go in SAP. So, I mean, if I look back in my career, I spent 15 years as a cancer research scientist at the lab bench. I spent 8 years in graduate school getting my PhD for something in cancer biology that I have absolutely no use for. that I do nothing with. I didn't, my first job, I was 29 when I finally graduated out of school. So I always feel like I'm, 8 or 9 years behind my peers because I was still stuck in school. And then I stayed in science for so long. But instead of like looking at that as, okay, that is maybe that wasn't the right fit for me or being myself, it set me up for the experiences in a very meandering way, and that's okay, set me up to be where I am in technology.
Yeah, I felt that too. I want to make a point here actually while we're talking about all this too. And I think all of us agree on this, and I think that it's the spirit of the book that we're not slighting Gartner, and Gartner is a great company. It just seemed like it wasn't a fit for Bill specifically, and I can relate to that in my own career too. And I've had places that just did not work for me, and I really wasn't happy. But I had people that I worked with that absolutely loved that, and that was the best thing for them, and they're still there, and that's it says less about the organization and probably more so about the fit between them. That corporate culture means something, and it means something when you're trying to attract people and recruit top talent, but it also means something in terms of retaining people and getting the best out of them too.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Yeah, go ahead, Christina.
Go ahead, Helen. All yours.
Good.
Well, first of all, Jessica, I'm even further geographically, and well, my first major is Russian linguistics. So I believe you can imagine how far it is from where I am right now. And secondly, I also had this kind of zigzagging between different jobs, and some of them were like really nothing to do with marketing, but ultimately it's like a puzzle, it's all coming together, and I believe it's a huge experience. And even in terms of corporate cultures and teams, it really helps. And at least you start understanding what you want. You need to try it out. You want to see, to try to put your hands on it, and then you understand better what exactly you're looking for. And I think this is precious. Christina?
I fully understand that, and I have to say this part of the book made me feel so much better about myself. I worked at a company for almost a decade, and I went to a new company, and it was not a cultural fit, but I decided to stick it out because I didn't know what else to do, and I was there for about 8 months before I found another job. And every single time people ask me, when they see my resume, what happened there? Like, what is this weird less than a year blip? And I never knew how to explain that. Just the job seemed good, but it was just a difference in philosophy. And to see that someone as successful as Bill has had this happen too, and that he dealt with it and talks openly about how it wasn't necessarily the job itself, it was more just the fit with the person, and that hadn't really been evaluated. And when he went to SAP, he learned something from it to say, does this culture fit me? Do I really want this particular job rather than a job? And he learned something from it. And so I feel much better about myself as a person after reading this book.
I think a lot of people are stuck in that situation where they're afraid. They're afraid to do anything because they feel like they don't have a choice. When in actuality, the first thing is having the integrity for yourself. Like know thyself, and really what is the right thing for you. And it's okay that if this didn't fit, then find something else that does fit. And I think what that leads me to kind of the point that I want to make about failure. I mean, Bill talks a lot about all of his successes. Like everything in there is about all his successes. And if we were to get a chance to talk to Bill, I think that some of the things that I would be interested in is like, what about failure? I forget which podcast it was. It was a Wondery podcast. And it talked about, I'll have to find it. It was the woman who was the producer for, I think, Pirates of the Caribbean, the movie. Mm-hmm. And they interviewed her on one of the podcasts, and she talks about her failure resume and how to be proud of her failure resume, because those are the things that we learn from, right? Those 8 months, Christina, it wasn't a cultural fit. There's something that you learn from it. And I think in this day and age, I'm encouraging people on my team, let's talk about your fail resume. Let's be proud of our failure resume.
Yeah, this is gonna sound a little silly, but I go back to Captain Picard when he has this thing, and there was an episode of Next Generation where they, he's reflecting back through his life, and it's a story. Obviously, it's fictional, but it has this great analogy that talks about life as a tapestry. There's always loose threads in your life, but if you spend your time pulling those apart and trying to correct those or cover them up, eventually the whole tapestry starts to unravel. And so it's better to just kind of own, these as learning lessons and say, okay, what did I get from this? Maybe it wasn't the best time in my life. Maybe it wasn't an easy time in my life. But at the end of the day, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And that's certainly been true here. It's certainly something we've seen in the book. It really makes you think, how do I respond to adversity? And what's the best way to be able to do that? What's the fastest way to be able to kind of go from the trough of disillusionment to a path of enlightenment to the success, in your career. So I'm glad he wrote it, because I think it certainly helps to outline that as a plot, to kind of say, hey, turn the page, literally and figuratively, right? There's something else in the next part of that. And maybe that's a good way for us to segue into SAP and really what he built out of that. Now, Bill, how long has he been at SAP now? Has it been 10 plus years, something like that?
Maybe more.
Okay.
Yeah.
And have any of you worked with SAP? Are is anybody, I know it's an enterprise resource planning system. I remember studying it a little bit in school. But have any of you had a chance to kind of sit in a room with some of the SAPers and kind of talk a little bit or seen some of that firsthand?
I worked for one of their competitors.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what he's about SAP. So when he walked into the company, huge history with the company. Obviously, they survived the first .com meltdown in 2001. And were in a pretty strong position, but sounded like there were some problems in North America. What was your sense, if you were to kind of summarize that, about some of the things that he kind of walked into as he was coming on board?
As far as I remember, he was describing like walking into Philadelphia office, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was dark and half empty, and there was like negativity everywhere. And I literally could sense it, how it was all distracted and kind of pulled apart, and he was feeling it everywhere, and he was describing it pretty, colorful.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe his first impression, like, we need to change the spirit, first of all. Like, we can't move forward until we, there should be light in those eyes.
I liked when I saw those first chapters that I think he was still trying to settle on his housing for Philadelphia, and that he was staying in the cottages or something like that were on the campus. In Newtown Square, and that process of walking to work every day and just talking to people, and academically we call that management by walking around, and that's always been kind of Bill's philosophy that I've seen here, is that he's not the type to sit in a corner office at a desk all day and look at profit and loss reports. He'd actually get out there and actually sit in on all these conference calls, and what do you all, I know we are tied to our computers to a certain extent, but for those of us who are on client side, I'm thinking like Brooke and Christina specifically, or can you tell me a little bit about some of the things or times in your career where you've walked around and then kind of had a conversation with somebody, even a water cooler chat, where it's just, wow, that opened my eyes to something I didn't even think about, and an opportunity in this business?
I think a lot about my previous organization, and I was in the marketing role there. It was a B2B manufacturing organization. And I think the times when I really learned the most about our customer base and what was going on in the field and how that was reflected was, the times when our sales team would come in, or when I'd have a chance to sit down with our inside sales team and talk about the types of conversations they were having and the feedback that they were getting from customers. Because as anybody who's worked in marketing knows, most of the time the feedback that you are exposed to is the negative feedback. But being able to hear from them too, some of the things that were positive and going right, and that customers were getting excited about, and trying to look at that as opportunities to be able to replicate those successes elsewhere. Maybe it was we'd get an email from somebody at Tesla that saw a video where we tried to infuse some humor and have a laugh at our own self, and somebody there would see it and mention to their sales guy, like, hey, I'm glad to see somebody at your marketing department has a sense of humor. And those were the times where we felt like we could connect to an audience that we couldn't necessarily see through somewhere else. And so those were always important conversations for me, and things that I got a lot of joy out of.
I actually had something recently, I can't give too much of it away, but in talking to someone in the kitchen, because my pizza was reheating, I found out that one of the pieces of marketing technology that we had recently decided to get rid of and had not re-signed a contract for, another team was now building a strategic plan around using similar technology. They were aware of the fact that this one was going away, but somehow those two things didn't connect in their head. And so just this waiting for my pizza to reheat so I could eat lunch ended up causing a whole conversation of, if you're building your 2019 strategy around being able to accomplish this, what process will you be using and what technology? And it opened up a greater conversation with a team that I don't work with too often, but do support. So I think that walking around by managing thing can really work out.
Yeah, it just seemed to parallel really his whole experience at SAP about being able to do that. And I read in the book a couple of times that we're not here to play office, and and really that interconnectivity between different departments and opening up communications really opened up so much more to that business. It's just amazing when you hear about where, his conversations. Actually, this is a great time to really bring in the conversation with Jim Snabe, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. But their combination between the sales and marketing side of things, and the production and the operations side of that business, and the collaboration between the two of them as co-CEOs to really round out the business. It takes a certain person to be able to kind of share a CEO role like that, don't you think?
Yeah, without the egos, without the, doing business behind closed doors, it's full transparency. Again, it has the, and again, it's that theme of integrity. He's always carrying himself and relationships with, with integrity. And again, those people relationships it's really important. I mean, everyone has their own way of developing those relationships. I personally, when I have new clients, or if I actually on my first day on a new job, I always bake something. Now it's getting more difficult because everyone has different food allergies, so I got to do like a gluten-free pumpkin bread. I used to come to the office, right? You're totally new. Nobody knows who you are. How do you start a conversation? Hey, would you like a whatever? I bake scones or whatever. I mean, so that's kind of my way of starting my relationships. Within an office building that doesn't have a lot of people, because, it's the conversation starter, right? It's about the people first.
So I'm glad you said that. So I have a quote as well. I think Christina and Brooke both brought one out, and I think it's page 84. And basically in page 84, Bill says, to get what I want, I have to give others what they want, performance. Unless I consistently meet and exceed goals and deliver on promises, no one owes me a thing. Passion is important. I know passion propels me forward during tough sales days and gives me the courage to take risks. Passion drove me to Stanford. But even if I wanted something more, I will never get what I want unless I have results to show for all my effort. It's pretty telling, isn't it? I think the thing that I'm just thinking about that whole section there, and it really makes me think It's another quote. I can't remember if it was in this book, and you guys tell me if it was, but it was a saying that nobody was ever received an award for what he received. It's always been for what he gave. And I think that whole philosophy of kind of giving first and saying, okay, what am I here to contribute to, rather than this is what I want, is probably a better way to go about it successfully.
And I kind of want to tie that kind of to what affects all of us right now being in the Marketo community, especially with, I know that there's a lot of talk about Marketing Nation Summit this year, how it's different, right? And there's a lot of chatter out there. But what did I think about? What would Bill do, right? It's what can we as a community give to this new, different Marketing Nation Summit? It's different, right? I mean, we're all sad that it's not going to be the same. Mm-hmm. But let's turn the page, figuratively and literally, and what can we do as a group to give to the community? Something bigger, something better, something different. Let's do what Bill would do, which is look at this as an opportunity. We have an opportunity here. What can we do?
There's so much that I'm excited for about this conference coming up. I'm really interested to see what Adobe has to the table from a B2C perspective. And I'm interested to meet all of the extra members of the community now. This is going to be, 2-3 times the size of what we normally have been at. Book your tickets right away. Shameless self-plug. The conference is March 24th and 28th in Vegas. And we're all going to be there, and we want you to be there as well too, and so that we can, talk about some of these books and some of the things that are coming down the pipeline. But if you just think of, strategically all of the different consumer data that now, has the potential to be folded in, where will the path go, right? We now went from from a road to a super highway of different opportunities and potential here. So I'm excited. I really am.
Well, I think that the great thing about Summit and what we've got ahead of us now, it does tie back to how Bill reflected of years down the road, people aren't going to remember the numbers. They're going to remember how you made them feel. And this is an opportunity for us to really get excited about the change and what the potential means for us. I mean, yeah, we've all had a wonderful, run with Marketo and Summit, and we'll always reflect back on how that made us feel. And so now it's a chance for us to add something new to that.
Guys, it dawns on me that we are over time. So I want to quickly kind of segue into to end this and really thank everybody here. But first, we want to talk about the next chapter in our Young and Fledgling book club here. So just as many of you have read Choose Your Own Adventure, our next meeting is going to be April 26th, Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Time. Want you to encourage everybody and invite your friends. And now each of us is going to pick a different book that we want to recommend, and we'll put this out to the audience to be able to vote on for about the next week or so, and make that our book to be able to read for the end of April here. And maybe we can do a little bit of a discussion informally when we're all at Summit together. But let's go around the room and then share some of our different books and sign off and let everybody get back to their days. So on my side of things, if you turn, just like Choose Your Own Adventure, if you turn to page 284, then Mike, Jessica, Brooke, and Christina are going to read Extreme Ownership, which is an interesting tale about how the U.S. Navy SEALs lead and win. These two gentlemen, Jocko and Leif, started a company after their experience in Iraq called Echelon Front, and they have taken, kind of like Bill's story, all of the different stories and experiences that they have running and being a part of combat missions in Iraq, and just think of what's involved with that, and taking those principles to the business world and then consulting people on how to remove ego and to assemble and lead a mission plan, and kind of what Bill had said about packaging ideas being able to package ideas to be able to help with leadership. So that's my recommendation for the next MarTech book club. Let's pass it. I'll pass the ball to, whose one is this? Who recommended On the Edge? Was that you, Christina?
I think Christina's probably, if this is Christina's, then she's probably transitioning. But I can speak to either. So this one's mine, The 12 Powers of a Marketing Leader. This is actually our and this is more, this would kind of be, I think this type of book is kind of the opposite of like the novel storytelling. The novel storytelling type book. It's more like, these are the 12 powers. These are basically, it's about how you impact, right, on different levels, right? First, your boss, your colleagues, your team. So it kind of expounds, I think it expounds on this idea of, okay, you got to deal with people, right? You got to lead the people. You have your goals, you have your processes, you have your technology, but how do you lead and mobilize your people? So that's my pick.
Great. Brooke, I think you're next.
Yeah, so I actually heard of this book from Lucas. He mentioned that this was a book that he's read multiple times now. And this sort of talks about where technology is sort of driving what the future is going to be like 30 years from now and how this pertains to our career roles. You know, if you take a look at all of the things that we do now, these are things that were really sort of in their infancy 30 years ago. Email, the personal computer, or, you know, when we started to get into the Palm Pilot and that sort of thing. You know, now we're sort of at this dynamic shift again, where we have the Google Home or the Amazon Echo, where everything's Alexa, can you do this? Or biometric, connectivity and the Internet of Things. And so all of this is going to deeply impact the careers that we all have in marketing and marketing technology, how we interact with our audiences, how we interact with each other, and how we interact with our things, the world around us as a whole. So I'm really intrigued to kind of take a look at what are some of the emerging technologies that he sort of calls out as things that we should maybe be keeping an eye on as we start to look toward what our careers will continue to look like going forward.
Great.
Okay. I am back. This is Christina.
Hey, Christina, welcome back. We were just talking about you and On the Edge. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So some of you guys might recognize this book. Allison Levine came to Marketo Summit in 2016, and she spoke as one of the keynotes, and she spoke specifically about the leadership principles that she writes about in this book. She not only summited Everest twice, but she's kind of an extreme adventurer, and so she takes what she learned about leadership and doing the right thing and puts it into this book and talks a lot about her experiences doing those extreme adventures.
That's great. All right. So the plan from here, as we've got it, is we've registered a domain name called MarTech Book Club. I should have made a slide for that, but we'll send that out afterwards. And so we'll be posting up those 4 titles as recommendations for the next book club again at the end of April. Please, again, feel free to invite and share your friends, and we'll communicate all that through email. And want to thank my fellow co-moderators here for being able to start on this discussion. And we hope it's the first of many. We hope that you and all of your colleagues and your friends will pick up a book and dive into Bill's story and dive into all the other stories that we've mentioned here. They're great ways to be able to build out your career and to build a great future for yourself. So thank you all for coming. You guys enjoy your day and have a great Friday and a great weekend.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Bye.